Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Curious Rebel TV. My name is Advita Patel and I'm the founder of Comms Rebel, I'm the co-founder of A Leader Like Me and a co-founder of CarMed Rebels. At Comms Rebel, we help people build inclusive cultures through effective communication. And today's guest is a good friend of mine as well, but also someone who has just as much passion, if not more, about inclusive cultures and equity and diversity. And I'm thrilled that Keith is here with me today. So without introducing Keith myself, I'm going to ask him to introduce who he is, why he's here, what we're going to be chatting about today as well. So over to you, Keith.
Do you know, I've never ever got nervous doing something like this, and suddenly my heart is just like. You shouldn't have said good friends because then it wouldn't have felt like there was so much riding.
Oh, sorry. On me. Right? Sorry, not a friend, a professional colleague.
Average guy that I know. So yeah, me. I'm Keith. I live in Chorley, northwest England. I'm not going to give you too much information. Don't want any stalkers. I live with my husband Neil, our two children, and yeah, I've been doing communications for 12 years, maybe ish. Like love things like digital media, intranets, video, audio, podcasts, things like that. So that's that kind of my sphere of influence internally. Yeah.
Amazing. And we actually became friends during COVID, right? We were online friends first.
Yeah, I think we were Twitter buddies, weren't we? And then
we were Twitter buddies when Twitter was a place where there was good stuff going on.
Yeah, when nice people were there.
I never go on there anymore now. A part of me was like, I miss that world a little bit, because those short snippets of chit chat and meet. Yeah. I met so many of my good friends I met on Twitter, or as it's now known as X, and I do miss that kind of short, snappy chats. Moments like you just escapism for a while, and now you definitely don't go to X to escape, do you? It's not like that.
And I've fallen into the trap as well. It's local election time here, so I've become the worst person on Twitter. So I'm trying to control myself a little bit because there's far too many things that I see that make me a keyboard warrior.
Well, you know what? That's how we did connect, because your advocacy and allyship for some of the stuff that I was sharing, specifically around underrepresented events, right?
That's right. Yeah, we kicked off together, didn't we?
I had an ally in you, Keith. That's how I see it, and we did, and it's so. And I know we're going to be talking about inclusive policies and processes, and I also want to talk to you about the adoption that you went through recently with Neil and your two beautiful children. But I just want us to touch on this allyship thing, right, a little bit, because I when I do the work that I do, when I talk to people about inclusive cultures and what you need to do to kind of build that and how you build a psychologically safe environment, a key part, and so often I'll get folks saying to me like, oh well, what can I do? I can't change the oppressiveness that sometimes some of these people face, or the systemic barriers that people come across. And I'm like, it's about that allyship that you can show. Yeah. And it can be so lonely sometimes as this kind of singular voice out there. Well, it feels like that at times when you're talking about events, and quite big events, right, by quite influential individuals hosting them, about and not seeing representation, and you're kind of speaking up because some people can't for various reasons, or some people are unable to. So I always try and champion that. But having at that time, remember this specific moment, I did feel a bit like it was just me kind of going on about it, and there's loads of people quite defensive about it. But you kind of came in and were like, hang on a minute, like it's true what's going on here, and people need to be aware of the influence that they have in the industry and the work that we do, and be mindful of the representation that we do surround ourselves by. And that was, for me, it was like, Keith is my person.
It's funny though, because that would have been 2020, wouldn't it? Yeah, like right at the start of the pandemic, when we were looking at, because that's when you started building your underrepresented speakers.
Yeah, it's when I started the underrepresented speaker. That's how it was, the underrepresented speakers.
But even now, it's still, like I saw the company I work for, I saw somebody attend a meeting in a completely different part of the world, but it was a round table, and it was something like 25 white people and one black guy, and the person that attended is the most allied type mindset. Like, the guy is remarkable, but he didn't look left and right when he was sat at the table and go, hang on, there's something wrong. And there's so much of it that's so what's the word, it's I don't know what I'm trying to say. It's just so much buried in ourselves, and unconscious is the word I'm trying to get to.
It's an implicit bias, right? It's that unconscious bias that was, even conscious bias that you're just not aware of at times.
But I think people are so then worried about, oh, well, do I have to remember to check that the other speakers on this panel are also diverse? Do I have to check the ESG values and visions that the organization that I'm going to be speaking on behalf of have set out? And kind of, yeah, you do have to. But actually, if you can't do all those things, have a look at who's around you and which of your friends probably don't look like you, probably don't sound like you, and just come alongside them. And that's the thing for me. Like, I remember seeing you kind of shouting into a void almost, and everybody kind of just scrolling past. And I just thought, do you know what? You don't need my voice. You don't need another white bloke's voice in this. But actually, the only people that get cut through because of the society is white bloke voices. So why the hell not shout as loud about the same thing? And my hope is that the allyship is pointing at what you do, and what, I mean, we could list 1,000 people, couldn't we? But the work that you people do, rather than me going, hey, look at me, I'm an ally. It's no, look, ignore me, but listen to my voice for a second and look over there. Yeah. And that for me is allyship. It's uncomfortable as hell as well. Like, I had somebody ask me once why I cared, and actually it was about trans people, and I'll be truly honest. I spent many years in a faith establishment where that group of people, that community of people, were always looked on as having things like mental health issues, and that's why they wanted to transition, and that was it. And absolutely, that's the mindset that I adopted for many years, and in my own coming out and my own exploration of my own sexual identity, it made me realize that actually it's so much more nuanced than just, oh, that person has mental health issues. And I remember breaking all of that by sitting down and talking to somebody that was going through a transitioning process, and just asking questions, and asking the hard questions as well. Like, I've been told it's this, I've been told it's that, or I believe this, and I still have many thoughts or many things in me that makes me think, well, the media tell us one thing and activists tell us another, and so I still get that deep ingrained conflict in my mind. But one of the things that I've realized is that it's not about me. It's not my business at the end of the day. And if I want to live my life as a gay man with 2 children, then I should advocate for a trans person to live their life as a transitioned individual without anybody else's say so in that. And so whether or not I understand it fully is completely irrelevant. Allyship is about saying it ain't to do with me, it's to do with them. And so it's hard. Right? It's so bloody difficult to get it.
It's really hard, and I can imagine there's lots of folks watching and thinking. Actually, you kind of articulated how they feel about that conflict that you often have in your head in terms of, where do I sit on this? What do I feel, and where do I want to be? And the wonderful woman Ruchika Tulsian, who I absolutely adore because of the work that she does in not only in terms of the diversity, equity, and inclusion space, but this empowerment that she brings. She often talks about that ally is a verb, right? You have to do something with it. It's not, you just can't say that you are. I mean, true allies don't say it anyway, like you quite clearly said. It's about, what am I doing to make a difference to that community who have potentially fewer privileges than I have, 100%. And are being, and don't have the visibility that they deserve or need, or the representation that we should be having from that space, and whatever that is. And that's why, for me, when I'm talking to event organizers or people who host podcasts and things like that, and I look at the lineup of individuals that they've had conversations with, And I don't see someone like me, or even not even like me, but somebody that represents the publics that we support in the UK and US and the world, really. To me, it feels like you're not interested in somebody different from you, and you don't care about our voice. And I can't, I mean, we're going to move on to the kind of policy stuff that we're here to talk about, but I am quite intrigued about people's behaviours and how they get quite. So I face either people ignoring it, which is it's their prerogative if they want to do that, or being completely like cut out, right? So I'll never get the support from them ever again. You know, I'll be like, I was like kicked out of a WhatsApp group not so long ago. You know, I've been ignored with emails, and I don't talk about this publicly because I always try and put myself in this kind of positive side. You know, it's anything like I want to bring energy to things, and things can be, and I always try and think that things can be hard for people. You know, and people change at their own pace. But this is the people need to understand that when you are an advocate and you're working in this space, you know, you are dealing with adversity almost daily. And you're dealing with people who don't want to have those conversations because it's uncomfortable for them. And the way they deal with it, because they're fearful, and the way they deal with it is by creating that barrier even further. And I won't, you know, the number of times I've sent that list to people and said, you know, I can recommend people for you. If you need some support, let me know. And they're just completely blanked me and have carried on in doing what they do. And even the ones who say to me today, like, oh, I'm an ally, you know, I'm an ally, I support you, I think it's great, still participate. And it's only until, like you said, those individuals who are participating stop participating and saying, until you bring more representation to the work you're doing, either it's podcast, event, or a panel, whatever, I can't support you. And if you want some help, let's take it. But people don't want to do that, Keith, right? And it was really funny because Zarina today told me a quote, which has just stuck with me. And she said, people want you to do well, but not better than them. A guy called Alex.
It's true for me sometimes. I'm not gonna
It's so true though, right? Like people want you to do well, but not better than them. And I think that defines the whole equity, diversity, inclusion space. People say to me, I'm not malicious. I want people to succeed, but to a level of, I want them to do well, but just not better than me. And that's Alex Hamazi who said that, actually, and we'll credit him in the comments and stuff. But while we're talking about the underrepresented list, Doreen will share the link for anyone who wants to access that. And it's not only about event organizers using it, but also if you feel that you're not represented on stage, on podcast, at events, on webinars, whatever, I'm not dictated what you know, any criteria. It's if you don't personally feel you're represented, then get your name on that list, because people are using it now. There are some incredible advocates out there who are using that list frequently to get in touch with people and ask them to be part of conversations.
It's not behind a paywall either. Like this is what I go to organizations. There's no buy our list of speakers.
No, I'm not saying sign up to our newsletter.
Have them. Get them out there.
I'm not going to make you fill in your email address or sign up to our newsletter or anything like that. It is a free tool. It's there. Anyway, we could talk about that all day, but we're not here to do that. I want to talk to you about first of all, I want to talk to us, get your thoughts, on policies and processes and the kind of inclusivity of that, because you've had living experience of having to navigate your way through the adoption process and some of the challenges that you came across or saw in terms of that. So do you just want to kind of explain just a bit of background for those who may not know some of your history, Keith, if that's okay?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess the process is, there's two types of policies. There's obviously your workplace, your employer, and how they look after you. But there's also, depending on who you go through, a lot of paperwork and process and policy and application, obviously, because you're going to be gifted to humans at the end of it, like we were. But they don't give them up freely anymore, and so there's lots of checks and balances and all sorts. But what for us was almost a 3-year process, for friends of mine has been a 7-year process, and it's still ongoing. And it can be even longer or shorter. But yeah, so our particular journey, Neil and I applied or started the application process in autumn 2021. We got married in October 2022, and at that point we had only just been approved. And that question was the approval process is, can these people have children? Yes. Not here's some children for you, but are these two people approved to be parents? And then that's kind of like the first half. The next half is finding those children and being matched with the right children, and then going through all sorts of things. And then at the end of that, a similar process of, are then these parents the right people for these children? Yes or no? And it can be a no. And at that point, you can have had children in your life for a period of time when you get that no, and that can be quite interesting. But it was fascinating. Like, if you can take yourself out and be objective to it, which Neil's a psychologist, and I'm not, but you can take yourself out of that environment and look at it objectively. It actually becomes a very fascinating study, really. We encountered things like, and we're two blokes, just in case that wasn't clear, and two cisgendered, so we've been blokes our whole lives. And there's a point we have to go and have a medical, which is probably the most humbling thing in the world, because when you write, I'm a 16-stone man, on your application form, and then you go and stand on the scales and the doctor said you lied, and you have to pretend you didn't do that on purpose. It's very humbling.
Yeah.
But you have to go and have a medical. You have to go and be poked and prodded and all sorts. And the paperwork that sits in front of your doctor, and this is one of the most, I didn't think it would catch my breath in the way that it did, but there was a question on there that said, why have the couple or the individuals chosen to adopt? And then it asks, why was there is there a failure to conceive, or infertility, or single parent, that kind of thing. So it goes through these things, and at no point does it say same sex or whatever else. It just goes straight to the gender typical failure to conceive, and so that's what we ticked. And Neil's doctor did the same. We have separate GPs, but Neil's doctor did the same: failure to conceive, and we submitted it. And that had its own little nuance when our social worker said, well, why have you put failure to conceive? So we were like, well, we've tried, and it's just not working. And we did it as a little bit of a middle finger to the system. How dare you not be more inclusive? It's 2021, for God's sake. But that, unfortunately, that heteronormative kind of theme runs through the whole process. And wonderfully, we've been able to feed back on it, and I know that change is going to happen, not just because of us, but there's countless other queer and gay couples that are out there, and lesbian couples that are out there that have adopted. But it was interesting. It was an interesting process, considering the process and going through that and the challenges that has. Getting into things like why I don't speak to members of family, or why, but ex partners, for example. That's not without its challenges, but.
And it's so interesting. Well, it's interesting and fascinating about, you're right. We are in the world that we're in today about 2024 now, and changes in that system. But there's this whole thing as well about, you're taking away our identity. You're going too woke. And I always say to folks, it's not about taking away from anybody. It's about including things, right? So we're not saying remove that line in the document. We're saying add to that. Make sure that you're adding to the conversation, and you're making sure that you're including other people's life in there. But people get so het up, and this is where challenge, and this is some of the challenges I think that we kind of face into in the world that we're in. It's about inclusivity. Is I don't want you to change anything, because we shouldn't, and you're taking away from me and taking away my identity. And it's like it's not about taking anything away from you. It's always about how can we make sure that the words that we're using and the language that we're using is as inclusive as it possibly can be. And I always say to the most marginalized person in the room, right?
Yeah.
So what are we doing to make sure that is right? And this takes us on to the language and inclusive language specifically, right? Because I am a big advocate of this, and I was humbled the other day when I posted my BS bingo sheet, because I felt as someone as an inclusive, an inclusion strategist and a comms specialist, those words that came out in that Britta report, which again we'll share in the comments if those folks haven't seen it, I was really humble. I was like, I use those words all the time, like game changer, right? And I am ashamed to say it, but I do use leverage as well, and holistic. Like, but when you really dig deep and think about it, you're like, what do those words even mean to like the everyday person when you're kind of going through that? So what would you advise, right? Somebody who's gone through this lived experience of not being included in forms and the process, and people making assumptions about your sexuality and the way you might, and why you might be going through adoption and things like that. When you read, even as a comms person, as a person who's responsible for words, what tips or advice would you give to folks in terms of just being a bit aware of what's going on around them? Like, how do you manage that to make sure that because no one's perfect. We're not saying people will make mistakes and things.
You don't have to be though, do you? Like,
you don't.
I've not checked with him, so if he does watch this, which he probably won't, but if he does watch this, I apologize in advance, and I will let you know after this. But one of the things that I'm 41 now. I was a 40-year-old bloke going off on adoption leave, and I think we're in a weird job, aren't we, in comms, and certainly the Ven into HR. We're so close to a lot of this stuff. The policy and process doesn't matter. So, like, I didn't need to know my payment schedule for adoption leave from day one, because I knew it would come, and I knew, because I'd worked on the policy and communicated the policy, how that was going to break down anyway. So I didn't need it. But not having it, I didn't realize, chipped away at something within me. And so then when I had to go and find it, even though I knew what it would be and I could write it down, when I had to go and find it to then do some maths, I felt a little bit lost. My boss at the time, who I've known, but like worked with him for 5 years, we were talking about getting the adoption cover in, somebody to join the team while I was off, and he was like, oh, when you've gone and this person's in, we're going to do this, so that you don't have to worry about that when you come back. I didn't hear any of that sentence other than when you've gone, and like, oh, when we've got your replacement in, yada 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 yada. There's all the work that's going to do. Can you help do like handovers and stuff and set them some work? I didn't hear any of that. I heard when you've gone, and it was so bizarre to me that language attacked it. I felt attacked by it. So in my head, I'm like, oh my god, he's getting rid of me. Like, when I've gone, when I've been replaced, and I honestly sat for about 2-3 months going, oh, I don't have a job to go back to, so why I'm even worried about what the share price is doing. And it was only in speaking to one of the HRBPs when I came back, and I was like, do you know what? I am able to separate myself from it and go, that's just his language. He's my mate. That's just the language we use. But if it affected me, and I am able to be reasonable over that and go, what he meant was, while you're not here. Imagine how a 25-year-old single mum, for example, who's at the start of her career in a big law firm, feels if she hears the same type of words. And it might be delivered in exactly the same way. It might be, we're getting some temporary cover in, but while you're not here or when you've gone, that's going to be so much more powerful, so much more damaging if the help isn't there for that individual. And so we've really, like, me and the HRBP were like, oh, there's a big language thing. Is there, do we do some simple training around it? Do we take every potential manager of a parent to be offline for a day and go, here's your training for the day, here's how you speak to this person? Even better, do we say, do you know what, you're a bloke and I'm a woman and I'm pregnant, so actually for the duration of my pregnancy, for everything pregnancy related, I'm going to have a female manager buddy who I can take that kind of, so I can talk about my body changing and comfort and to somebody that understands it. So we started going through all these things and thinking about that. And then one of our returning parents was like, right, I'm going to change the world and let's put this entire thing in place. Kind of while me and the HRBP are going, well, how can we do this different? Somebody's done it differently, and it's remarkable. It's going to be a whole network, and I'm delighted to join it and be a part of it, and not be sticking my oar in to change anything. I'm really excited to be a parent and be part of the network. But things like language, things like how you approach people and talk to people. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think I have a top tip. I think in a month's time, maybe 2 months time, I might have some top tips, and I'd be happy to try and capture them. But just being mindful of how we say things and how we share things, and actually, if we say that there's a payment schedule, for example, let's get that out quickly. And rather than just saying, here's your payment schedule, let's say, here's your payment schedule. Let's sit down and break that down for you, because while you're on maternity, paternity, or parental leave, you get paid weekly, not salaried monthly, if that's your typical salary. You know, prepare for your fluctuations, and just having that further thought into things, I think is how you break down a lot of that. Anyway.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's that, you know what, while you were chatting there, Keith, it reminded me about personalization, right?
Yeah.
And how you personalize that person's experience. And some people will want to be treated differently than others, and that's fair and that's okay. But you're right in terms of, as a leader, as a people manager in an organization where you're responsible for someone's work, but also well-being, and making sure that they get treated equitably and fairly. We have to be quite mindful about what that means and what that looks like for us and our team. So, you know, you feeding back to your manager, who you said you've got a great relationship with, will mean going forward that 100%. Individual will be very mindful of the next conversation he has with somebody who may be going on adoption leave or maternity leave or paternity leave, or, you know, whatever, in terms of caring responsibilities. So that's really, so that I think, so yeah, go on, sorry.
Well, I was gonna say, one of the things that we know, I think we'll have all said it, is that we promote people into being managerial roles because they're great at the work and not necessarily great at the people. And I think we do a disservice to our line managers and our people managers, because when we have, and take parental leave, for example, you know, how many people are out there going, well, I don't know how to talk to this individual. They've got a headache. Is that maternity? Is that pregnancy related? Am I even allowed to ask? You know, so we do a disservice to actually the line managers as well. And I do wonder whether we make the entire experience more effortless for parents going on leave by putting in some really solid support for the line managers of those people and training them to be excellent. Because I think that's sometimes where the fall down is. And I think if there's an individual going off and you think, my manager has been taken offline and specifically trained to look after me, how much does that change your perspective on the company you work for? And then in terms of coming back at the end of it, do you need to incentivize that? That person already feels like they belong. So they're already going to feel like they're wanted back at the end of it. So I just think that my top tip is get your line manager support right, because they're the ones that look after the people. So
I couldn't agree more. I think we've always had this kind of challenge in the internal comms world as well, about that line manager population being the critical factor, you know, in success of communication, but also culture and behaviors. On all of that, and you know, it'll be great to kind of carry on that kind of discussion around. We do talk about in events and stuff, but I feel like it's always the same kind of stuff that we do talk about. But you're right. Like, how do we help our leaders grow and develop and give them the confidence to address some of the challenges that might be coming their way in the world that we're moving into? Which is, I
have to say, we're spoiled. We have a great HR team. I'm not just saying it because I know they will listen, but we have a great HR team. And my personal journey, like I said, I'm too close to it to have a typical journey, but mine was brilliant, and I was able to throw any kind of question at somebody, and they come back straight away, and it was just just amazing. And I just think you recognise, to the point of individuality, you can have great policies and be lenient, but you can't have lenient policies and be great. So I just individualizing it for people is probably the best.
I love that. And you advocate for them, right? And that's the thing.
I love my job, like specifically because they're watching. No, I do. I love my job.
Bosses and colleagues. We're at 30 minutes, so I've passed by there, Keith. We could talk for hours, as we know.
We should do.
So last week's guest was Sharon O'Day. which was a great conversation, and we'll share links to previous conversation a lot. But Sharon's question to you, Keith, was, and I know this is your other kind of space and love, is there still a place for, do intranets still matter? That was her exact question. Do intranets still matter?
It's a big question. Yes and no. Is the need to share knowledge, connect colleagues, and deliver information, whether that's through a communications perspective or through a you work here and need to know this perspective, is that need ever going to go away? No. Do we need to have a drag me to it location with a drop down menu that tells me who works in HR on a Tuesday and is responsible for 3 documents on the website? I don't think we do. And I think one of the things that I'm really enjoying looking at now, and AI is going to kick into it massively, but if we put information where people are rather than drag people to static information, the concept of an intranet changes massively. So do we still have a need to communicate and knowledge share? Yes. Does that need to be a single server full of connected web pages? Probably not anymore. And the power of an AI search bar saying, go find me the policy on adoption leave, and it returning it straight to your phone, or email me the policy on adoption leave, and it being in your inbox when you get to your desk. I think that's the future that we're facing. So the need to communicate, yes. The single location to do that, no.
Love it.
Is that right? Is that...
I love it. That was really impressive. I love it.
I might get a snippet of that if that's right, because that felt quite knowledgeable.
That's really good. I love that. And then what's your question for our next week's guest?
I would say, how would you create or advise creating a policy around things like around the personal things like parental leave or absence or dress codes or things like that? What's your top tip for creating the policy in the best possible way so that it serves the organization?
Love
I'll probably write that down for you so that's a bit easier.
Question. We've got it. Dorini's on it. We love
Go on, Dorini.
I think Sapna is going to enjoy answering that next week. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Keith. If people want to engage with you, follow you, where is that place? Is it LinkedIn? Is it X?
Yeah, LinkedIn's probably more professional. You'll probably have a better impression of me on LinkedIn, but if you fancy dipping in and joining in some rants and shouting at organizations that aren't diverse, then Twitter.
We'll share Keith's details in the comments as well. So I highly recommend you follow Keith. He is an incredible person, which I know he finds people saying that about him uncomfortable. I know that, but he is. He's a great friend, a fantastic ally, and an incredible professional when it comes to internal comms and all things communication as well. So do follow him and connect with him. And if you want support with inclusive cultures and communications and confidence and things like that, then please do get in touch with the team. You can email us at hello@commsrebel.com and we'd love to support you. And we will see, hopefully, some of you next week when I'm chatting to Sapna about class ceilings. So we're going to talk about social mobility and socioeconomic stuff as well, which is going to be an equally incredible conversation. But thank you everyone for watching, and thank you so much for Keith for joining me today. See you all soon.